Fake marriage contract. Valentina Rodriguez sat in a glass-walled boardroom high above Manhattan, her hands trembling as she held a gold pen over a contract valued at $50 million. The emerald silk of her dress caught the afternoon light, the same shade as her sharp green eyes fixed on the man across from her. Gabriel Williams, billionaire heir turned tech giant, sat in silence, his charcoal suit perfectly pressed, his gaze steady and unreadable. Behind him, the Statue of Liberty stood framed through the towering windows, a silent witness to a decision that would change both their lives. She had less than 30 seconds. Sign the contract and preserve the business her family had built over 3 generations, or walk away and watch everything collapse. The air in the room seemed charged with unspoken stakes. Her chest tightened as she lowered the pen closer to the page. This signature will either save my family's legacy or destroy my soul, Valentina whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. But I never expected it to change my heart forever. What would you do if saving everything you loved meant sacrificing your own truth? Subscribe for tomorrow's chapter and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life. Let's begin. 3 weeks earlier, the Rodriguez family name balanced on the edge of collapse. In a glass conference room in Midtown Manhattan, accountants spoke in rapid voices, presenting charts and figures that looked more like death sentences than numbers. Rodriguez Holdings, once a proud empire of hotels and vineyards, was facing debts totaling $47 million. Valentina Rodriguez sat at the head of the table, shoulders straight but heart pounding. Every line of the spreadsheet screamed the same truth. A fraudulent partner had siphoned funds, leaving the company exposed. Creditors were circling. Miami's oceanfront hotel, the jewel of the family portfolio, was days away from being repossessed. The Napa Valley vineyard, her grandfather's pride, would follow. Her grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, had arrived in New York in 1952 with nothing more than calloused hands and determination. From a single food cart in Queens, he worked until his small dream grew into something extraordinary. By the time Valentina was born, Rodriguez Holdings had become a respected name in hospitality, with properties spanning coast to coast. He used to tell her, "Every plate we serve, every door we open, is a chance to honor the sacrifices of those who came before." Now that legacy was slipping through her fingers. Valentina pressed her palm against the cool conference table, grounding herself against the storm of voices. Saving the company was no longer about numbers on a balance sheet. It was about protecting 3 generations of labor, sacrifice, and hope. She walked out of the meeting and into the brisk October air, Central Park glowing in autumn gold across the street. For a moment, she allowed herself to stand still, watching joggers pass, children chase each other, and couples stroll hand in hand. Her own life felt like it had stopped, frozen under the weight of responsibility. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Mija, whatever you decide, remember we are proud of you." Valentina slipped the phone back into her clutch, eyes burning with unshed tears. Pride was cold comfort when her family's empire was on the auction block. That night, she sat at her small Upper East Side apartment, surrounded by blueprints she once drew in architecture school. Before stepping into the family business, she dreamed of designing skyscrapers and cultural centers that would stand for centuries. But when her father fell ill, she abandoned those ambitions to safeguard the company. Her reflection in the window looked like 2 different women, the girl who once chased dreams and the woman now forced into impossible choices. 2 days later, her attorney arranged a meeting with an unlikely contact. Gabriel Williams, tech billionaire, founder of Williams Global, a man whose face appeared regularly on magazine covers, who was equally known for his relentless work ethic and his guarded private life. She had read about him before. Half Chinese, half African American, he had built his empire on artificial intelligence and renewable energy, creating technology that reshaped entire industries. Reporters often described him as commanding, disciplined, a man who left no room for weakness. Yet the invitation to meet him in Central Park suggested something far more personal than a simple business transaction. Valentina arrived at Bethesda Terrace, heels clicking against the stone pavement. The air carried the crisp scent of fall, and the fountain shimmered in late afternoon light. She found Gabriel waiting near the steps, his posture controlled, his eyes scanning the crowd with quiet intensity. "Miss Rodriguez," he said, extending a hand. His voice carried traces of both Beijing and Oakland, hints of the two worlds that had shaped him. "Mr. Chen Williams," she replied, gripping his hand firmly. He gestured toward a bench overlooking the water. "Let's speak plainly." Valentina sat, nerves sparking beneath her calm exterior. He wasted no time. "My grandmother is gravely ill," Gabriel said. "Her one request is to see me married before she passes. She has already planned the ceremony in San Francisco. The invitations are sent. The dates are chosen." His gaze held steady. "What I lack is a bride." Valentina blinked, uncertain she'd heard correctly. "And you think that bride should be me?" "You need stability to protect your company," he replied smoothly. "A partnership with me would give you that. Creditors will see Rodriguez Holdings tied to Chen Williams Global. Confidence will return. Your assets can be preserved." Her pulse quickened. He was proposing a contract marriage. "Why me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice level. "Because your reputation is untarnished, your family's legacy respected, and unlike many in my circle, you understand responsibility," Gabriel said. "This arrangement would benefit us both. It does not require affection, only commitment to terms." Valentina's thoughts raced. A marriage in name only? To a man she barely knew? It was absurd. Yet the alternative was watching her grandfather's empire dismantled piece by piece. Gabriel leaned slightly closer. "Consider this carefully. You will gain time, resources, and protection. In exchange, I will fulfill my grandmother's wish." She stood, unsettled by the weight of the proposition. "You're asking me to trade my freedom for a contract." He rose as well, his tone firm but not unkind. "I'm asking you to decide what your legacy is worth." As she walked away, the sounds of Central Park swirled around her, but none of it reached her. His words echoed in her mind. Legacy. Worth. Choice. 3 weeks later, she would sit in a glass tower, a gold pen trembling in her hand, facing the most impossible decision of her life. 2 weeks after that tense meeting in Central Park, Valentina found herself boarding a flight to San Francisco, her stomach tied in knots. The arrangement had been agreed upon, contracts signed by lawyers, and yet it felt surreal. She told herself it was business, nothing more. But when the plane touched down, the weight of what was about to happen pressed on her chest. The wedding was set at Buddha's Universal Church in Chinatown, a site chosen by Gabriel's grandmother. Though frail, the woman carried herself with regal presence, her determination unshaken by failing health. From the moment Valentina arrived, it was clear Nai would accept nothing less than absolute adherence to tradition. At dawn, preparations began. Valentina stood before a mirror in a small dressing room, draped in a red qipao embroidered with golden thread. The fabric shimmered under the morning light, hugging her frame with elegance she never thought possible. Her emerald eyes seemed sharper against the bold red, her hair pinned in a style she had never worn before. When Gabriel entered, dressed in a black silk tang suit, the air seemed to shift. He looked every inch the groom, composed yet carrying something unspoken in his eyes. For a moment, Valentina forgot the contract, the terms, the business. She felt the pressure of his presence, as though this day meant more than either of them admitted. The tea ceremony began in a hall lined with ancestral portraits and offerings. Valentina knelt beside Gabriel as trays of steaming cups were brought forth. One by one, they presented tea to the elders, bowing in respect, accepting blessings, and receiving symbolic gifts, gold bracelets, red envelopes, words of guidance for the path ahead. When Nai lifted her cup, her trembling hands steadied as she looked at Valentina. "You are family now," she said, voice soft yet firm. The statement carried more weight than any legal document Valentina had ever signed. Afterward, the guests moved to San Francisco City Hall. Its marble floors echoed beneath their footsteps, its grand rotunda towering overhead. Reporters lingered outside, but inside the ceremony was quiet, solemn. A city official recited the vows, simple words that were supposed to mean nothing more than formality. Yet when Valentina repeated the lines, her throat tightened. She met Gabriel's gaze, expecting cool detachment, but found something else. His eyes softened, his voice steadied as he spoke his vows, and for one fragile instant it felt real. Not a performance. Not a bargain. Something genuine flickered between them. The signing of papers was swift, a blur of pens and documents. Cameras flashed outside, capturing the billionaire and his new bride, sealing the image the world expected to see. That evening, they retreated to a penthouse in Nob Hill. From its windows, the city glittered, cable cars humming in the distance, the Bay Bridge glowing like a silver chain across the water. Inside, silence stretched between them. Two strangers bound by contract, standing in a space meant for intimacy. Valentina removed the heavy jewelry and folded the red chipao with care, placing it on a chair as if it were a relic. Gabriel loosened his collar, pouring himself a glass of water before turning to her. "You handled today with grace," he said, his tone even, though there was something softer beneath it. She managed a small smile. "I survived it. That counts for something." Neither moved closer. Neither retreated. They hovered in an unfamiliar middle ground, suspended between duty and discovery. Later, as Valentina lay in the guest room staring at the ceiling, she couldn't shake the moment in City Hall when their eyes had locked. It unsettled her. This was supposed to be a performance, a temporary solution. Yet something about the way Gabriel looked at her, like he saw more than the contract, made her wonder if they had both stepped into something far beyond what they had planned. The city outside pulsed with life, but inside that penthouse, two married strangers rested under the same roof, uncertain of where their carefully drawn lines would hold and where they might begin to blur. The flight to Los Angeles was brief, but Valentina felt as though she had entered another world. A black car carried them through the hills of Bel Air, turning into a gated driveway that stretched toward a modern mansion perched high above the city. Worth $15 million, the home was designed with walls of glass that opened to sweeping views of Los Angeles. The infinity pool at the edge of the terrace seemed to spill directly into the sea of lights below. For appearances, this was their honeymoon. For Valentina, it was also a gilded cage. Cameras would catch glimpses of them arriving or leaving, and gossip columns would speculate about their chemistry. Inside, the silence belonged to them alone. Their days fell into rhythm. Gabriel rose early, moving into the sleek home office overlooking the canyon. From there, he managed calls across continents, screens lighting up with charts, market reports, and negotiations. His voice, calm yet commanding, carried through the glass doors even when he spoke in hushed tones. Meanwhile, Valentina claimed the mansion's vast library as her workspace. Stacks of legal folders, unpaid invoices, and spreadsheets covered the long oak table. Every morning, she wrestled with numbers, calculating debts, restructuring plans, drafting proposals for investors still skeptical of Rodriguez Holdings' survival. At times she felt crushed beneath it all, but the view of the skyline reminded her that starting over was possible. Their paths crossed during small breaks, passing each other in the kitchen, sharing quick lunches by the pool, exchanging a glance that lingered longer than either intended. The house, enormous as it was, seemed to shrink with each passing day. By evening, the facade softened. Gabriel suggested walks along the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They strolled past glowing theaters and crowded sidewalks, blending into the city's endless energy. Among the tourists and performers, they shared stories that had little to do with contracts. Valentina spoke of summers in San Juan, helping her grandmother sell pastels from a small cart. Gabriel recalled afternoons in Shanghai, learning calligraphy from his grandfather, who insisted it was as important as mathematics. Those walks carved out something fragile between them. Laughter slipped in, unplanned and unforced. One night, Gabriel reserved a corner table at Mastro's in Beverly Hills. The restaurant glowed with low light, soft music, and the kind of quiet luxury that suited him. Valentina wore a gown the color of midnight, her hair swept into simple waves. She had meant to keep the evening light, yet over the course of the meal, her guard loosened. When dessert arrived, she confessed the secret she had buried for years. "I wanted to be an architect," she said, tracing the rim of her glass. "Before the company fell apart, before all of this, I dreamed of designing hotels that didn't just house people, but connected them to the places they visited. Sustainable, timeless spaces." Gabriel studied her closely, his fork resting untouched. "Why did you stop?" "My father," she answered softly. "He needed me at the company. He said dreams could wait, but survival couldn't." I believed him. Silence followed, but it wasn't empty. Gabriel leaned forward. "Dreams don't expire, Valentina. Circumstances change, but the vision is still yours. You just have to decide when you're ready to claim it." Her chest tightened. No one had said those words to her before. Not her family, not her business partners. For a moment, she looked at him not as the man she had agreed to marry for convenience, but as someone who saw her in a way she hadn't expected. When they returned to the mansion that night, the distance between them felt different. They didn't cross any lines, but their silence carried a weight, less guarded, more curious. Days stretched into weeks. They learned each other's habits without trying. She discovered he drank coffee black, no sugar. He noticed she hummed softly when lost in calculations. She teased him for organizing his wardrobe by color. He teased her for keeping too many pens scattered around the library table. The marriage was still a charade to the world, but inside the mansion, something else was taking shape. A partnership, a quiet comfort, a growing closeness neither could define, yet neither wanted to ignore. As Los Angeles glittered outside, Valentina realized the contract that bound them might have set the stage, but it was no longer the only force drawing them together. The Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami buzzed with international guests, artists, and collectors who had flown in for Art Basel. Valentina stepped out of the car in a tailored ivory dress that fell just below her knees, her arm linked through Gabriel's. Cameras flashed as the pair crossed the entrance, their presence expected, their every gesture scrutinized. Inside, the air was electric with conversation and movement. Sculptures towered across the lobby, and curated installations filled adjoining halls. Gabriel remained poised, his sharp gaze shifting between familiar faces, while Valentina matched his stride with careful grace. Every step reminded her that this was a stage. Their marriage was still meant to appear seamless to the world. The real challenge came later that evening in Wynwood. A gallery opening drew the elite of the art and business world, and among them stood Charles Hampton III. Tall, with polished confidence and the kind of smile that rarely reached his eyes, Charles had once tried to acquire Rodriguez Holdings before the scandal. Now seeing Valentina with Gabriel offered him new ammunition. "Well, well," Charles greeted, glass of champagne in hand. "Mrs. Chun-Williams. I must admit, I didn't expect to see you here. Or married, for that matter." His gaze lingered too long, daring her to falter. Valentina felt Gabriel's arm tense. She steadied herself, keeping her tone light but firm. "Life has a way of surprising us all, doesn't it? Gabriel, and I thought it was time to stop waiting for the perfect moment." She glanced at Gabriel with a smile that looked effortless, though her heart pounded. Charles's smirk deepened. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say? Marriage right when your company needs a lifeline, and right when Gabriel's family expects commitment." His voice carried enough volume to reach others nearby. Several heads turned. For a beat, silence pressed in. Valentina could almost hear the cameras in people's hands, waiting to capture cracks in their story. She leaned into Gabriel, resting her hand against his chest. Convenience had nothing to do with it. Sometimes you meet someone who sees you for who you really are. That's what matters. Isn't that right, love? Her words carried steady warmth, but her eyes dared Charles to challenge her further. Gabriel didn't miss a beat. He drew her closer, his arm wrapping securely around her waist. "That's exactly right," he said, his tone low but commanding. And unlike some people in this room, we don't need to justify our partnership to anyone. His gaze locked on Charles, sharp enough to cut through the man's smugness. The crowd shifted back into conversation, curiosity satisfied, but the damage had been contained. Charles lifted his glass, offered a shallow nod, and retreated. When the evening concluded, Valentina exhaled in relief as they left the gallery. Outside, the Miami night wrapped them in its warmth, the sound of waves echoing in the distance. Gabriel took her hand, not as part of an act, but with quiet assurance, and suggested they walk before heading back. South Beach stretched before them, the sand cool beneath their shoes, the ocean glimmering under moonlight. Tourists laughed in the distance, music from nearby clubs pulsed faintly, but between them it was quiet. "You were brilliant in there," Gabriel said. "I just did what I had to do," she replied, her voice softer now. He stopped walking, turning to face her. "No, you did more than that. You carried yourself with strength most people could never fake. You reminded everyone, including me, that this isn't just about survival. You belong in every room, Valentina. No one can take that from you." Her breath caught. The sincerity in his tone was heavier than the scripted affection they had shown all evening. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was pretending. They walked on, the surf brushing close to their feet. Valentina's thoughts drifted back to the first day in that Manhattan boardroom, when signing the contract felt like sacrificing herself for her family's sake. Now, under the Miami sky, she realized something unexpected. The marriage might have begun as a shield against ruin, but somewhere along the way, it had started to feel like a partnership built on something far stronger. Neither said the words out loud, but both knew their arrangement was shifting. What had begun as necessity was taking on a life of its own. Autumn in Boston painted the city in shades of gold, amber, and crimson. From their suite at the Four Seasons overlooking the public garden, Valentina and Gabriel watched the trees sway in the crisp October breeze, leaves drifting gently onto the paths below. The hotel's expansive windows framed the seasonal beauty, but inside, the tension of their travels and responsibilities weighed quietly between them. Gabriel had business obligations in the city, yet he had insisted they walk the Freedom Trail together. Valentina found herself navigating cobblestone streets in Beacon Hill, the crisp air brushing against her cheeks. The historic row houses and wrought iron fences seemed frozen in time, a reminder of permanence, something she longed for in her own life. As they reached Boston Common, Valentina slowed. She stopped, her gaze tracing the families playing along the tree-lined paths. For a moment, she drew in the serenity, then exhaled a confession that had been building inside her. "I'm terrified," she admitted quietly. 3 generations of my family worked to build something extraordinary. If I fail, it won't just be numbers on a ledger. It'll be a betrayal of everything they sacrificed. Gabriel stopped beside her, letting the moment settle. His hand hovered near hers, a silent offer of steadiness. "You're not carrying this burden alone anymore," he said, his voice low, carrying weight without being overbearing. "I can't undo the past, but we can face what's ahead together. You don't have to do it alone." Valentina's throat tightened. For the first time since agreeing to the contract, she allowed herself to lean into someone else's presence. His words weren't a business plan. They weren't a tactic. They were genuine. They continued walking through the park, the crunch of leaves underfoot marking each step. She shared details she had hidden even from her closest advisors. Her insecurities, the sleepless nights, the fear that the empire built by her grandfather could crumble despite her best efforts. Gabriel listened, his expression softening with each revelation. "I've always admired your strength," he said after a pause. "But strength doesn't mean you have to do everything by yourself. You can lean on me, just as you lean on the family who loves you." Valentina glanced up, meeting his eyes. For a brief moment, she recognized a truth she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. This wasn't just a business arrangement, and it hadn't been all pretense. Their connection was shifting, evolving beyond the boundaries of contracts, appearances, and obligation. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, They found themselves at the Charles River, the water reflecting streaks of orange and purple. Boats glided along the calm surface, and the city skyline shimmered faintly in the distance. Gabriel stepped closer, the space between them narrowing in a way that felt natural rather than forced. "I care about you, Valentina," he said quietly. The words were simple, unembellished, but their sincerity carried. She felt her heart respond before her mind could intervene. "I care about you too," she whispered, the admission shocking only because it had been forbidden by her own logic. They stood together, watching the sun settle behind the horizon, letting the silence speak for what neither had fully articulated until that moment. It was the first time they acknowledged the possibility of something real, something that could survive beyond legal papers and social expectation. Later, as they returned to the hotel, Valentina reflected on the day. The contract had brought them together, yes, but it could not dictate what they were beginning to feel. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a partnership that was both personal and professional, one where trust, understanding, and mutual care mattered more than any clause in a document. Gabriel opened the suite door and gestured toward the city view once again. "I want you to know," he said, standing behind her as she looked out over the river, "that my intentions go beyond appearances, obligations, or family expectations. What we could have, it deserves honesty." Valentina turned to face him, her pulse quickening, realizing that the distance they had maintained for propriety had dissolved under the weight of shared vulnerability. The crisp Boston air, the colored leaves, the quiet power of the Charles River, it all seemed to affirm what her mind had resisted. Their connection was genuine, and the rules they had set for themselves no longer applied in the same way. That night, in their suite overlooking the city, neither spoke of contracts or debts. Instead, they talked quietly about the days to come, about dreams, fears, and the courage it would take to pursue both. For the first time in weeks, Valentina felt unguarded. The mansion in Los Angeles, the public appearances, even the formal ceremonies, they had all been steps toward this moment, the moment when trust and understanding replaced pretense. By the time they lay down to sleep, Valentina knew the course of their relationship had shifted. The contract that had been the starting point could no longer define the trajectory of their partnership. What had begun as obligation was evolving into a foundation of mutual respect and care, one that might endure far beyond any legal arrangement. In the quiet of Boston's autumn night, with the river reflecting the glow of distant streetlights, they allowed themselves to feel something that neither had anticipated: hope. Hope that they could face challenges together, hope that a business arrangement could transform into partnership, hope that they might truly belong to each other. Not because of necessity, but because of choice. Gabriel and Valentina arrived at the Palmer House Hilton during a crisp November afternoon. The hotel's towering windows framed Millennium Park, where the reflection of Cloud Gate mirrored the city's skyline with startling clarity. The air outside carried the scent of fall leaves and distant river water, a reminder of Chicago's balance between energy and calm. Their stay coincided with an international business conference. Both had to maintain appearances: Valentina, the poised wife of a tech billionaire, and Gabriel, the commanding figure of an empire spanning continents. They navigated crowded hallways, exchanged greetings with investors, and smiled through introductions that masked the tension simmering beneath their calm. During one late afternoon, they slipped away to the Chicago Riverwalk. The sun hung low, casting warm tones across the river's surface as boats traced slow arcs in the water. Gabriel's hand found Valentina's naturally, a subtle reassurance as he led her toward a quieter section of the promenade. "I just spoke with my grandmother's doctor," he said softly, almost hesitant. "Her condition has improved. The treatment is working better than expected. She could have years ahead of her." Valentina stopped walking, the implications settling around her like the chilly wind off the river. The contract that had originally bound them was based on a limited timeline, a necessity born of urgency. If her husband's grandmother lived longer, the arrangement could extend indefinitely. "That changes things," she admitted, her voice low. "It was supposed to be temporary." We agreed to it knowing the clock was ticking. Now, Gabriel nodded, his gaze following the movement of ducks along the river. Now we need to consider what we actually want, not just what we thought we needed. They continued walking, the city sounds a muted backdrop to their conversation. Valentina felt the weight of their choices pressing closer. Her mind raced between duty to her family, the survival of Rodriguez Holdings, and the growing complexity of her feelings for Gabriel. That evening, back in their suite, they spoke at length. The hotel room overlooked the twinkling lights of the city, with the Chicago River reflecting streaks of orange and gold from the setting sun. They sat opposite each other on the edge of a deep sofa, the room quiet except for the occasional murmur from the street below. "I never expected any of this to get complicated," Valentina admitted. "I thought we could follow the plan, execute it perfectly, and go our separate ways when it was done." Gabriel leaned back, his hands resting loosely on his knees. "Plans don't account for human things," he said. "Feelings, instincts, trust. Those aren't clauses in a contract, yet they've guided every choice I've made with you." Valentina's eyes searched his, tracing the sincerity she saw there. She had agreed to this arrangement for practicality, for family, for survival. But the moments they had shared in Boston, Miami, Los Angeles, and beyond had shifted something. What had begun as a business decision was now a personal matter, one neither could ignore. "Do you think we can separate what we want from what we agreed to?" she asked cautiously. Gabriel considered it for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Maybe it isn't about separating them. Maybe it's about aligning them, understanding what we want and what we need, and seeing where they overlap." The conversation stretched into the night. They spoke of dreams, of fears, and of the small details that had drawn them together. Walks along riverbanks, shared meals, quiet laughter when the world wasn't watching. There was no rush, no pressure. Just an honest exchange, uninterrupted by the obligations they carried outside the room. By midnight, they had reached a tentative understanding. The contract had served its purpose, but it could no longer define the boundaries of their connection. What mattered now were the choices they made freely, without expectation, guided by mutual respect and the realization that partnership was more than a legal arrangement. Gabriel reached for her hand, the gesture unassuming but filled with intent. "Whatever comes next," he said, "we face it together. That's the only certainty I need." Valentina allowed herself a quiet smile, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The Chicago skyline stretched beyond the window, glittering in the night. She no longer felt like a participant in a plan designed solely to save her family's empire. She felt like an equal partner, with a voice, a choice, and the courage to pursue both business and personal fulfillment. In that hotel room, the city below seemed to shrink, leaving only them and the path they were beginning to define together. It was a turning point. They were no longer two strangers bound by necessity. They were partners in every sense that mattered, navigating the uncertain path ahead with shared purpose. When sleep finally claimed them, it was with the comfort that comes from honesty and mutual understanding. The contract that had once dictated their days no longer held that power. They had discovered something beyond obligations, trust, care, and the potential for something lasting, born not of circumstance but of choice. The Sonoran Desert stretched endlessly beneath the deepening sunset, Camelback Mountain etched in amber and rose against the sky. At the Scottsdale Resort, Valentina and Gabriel mounted horses for a ride along sandy trails dotted with towering saguaro cacti. The desert air was warm but dry, and the distant mountains cast long shadows across the rugged terrain. For a while, they rode in companionable silence, the only sound the clip-clop of hooves against the earth and the soft murmur of desert wildlife. Valentina felt grounded in a way she hadn't during their whirlwind travels. No boardrooms, no cameras, no expectations beyond moving forward at the pace of their own choosing. "I've been thinking," she said, breaking the quiet, "about the hotels, the properties, and everything my family built. I don't want to simply preserve the legacy. I want to transform it." Gabriel turned his horse slightly to face her. "Transform how?" I want to combine sustainability with design, keeping the spirit of each property while making it environmentally responsible, she explained. Imagine hotels that blend with nature, tell the story of their surroundings, and remain part of the community rather than dominating it. It's a way to honor what we inherited while creating something new. He studied her, admiration in his dark eyes. Your vision, it's remarkable. I've watched you handle every crisis, every challenge, and now I see what truly drives you. It's not survival alone. It's purpose. The desert sky deepened to shades of indigo, and they dismounted near a rock formation that overlooked the valley below. Gabriel guided Valentina's horse to a safe spot and gestured toward the horizon. I'm realizing more and more that it's not just your mind that impresses me. It's your heart, your passion, the way you see possibilities where others see only limits. Valentina felt warmth spread through her chest, a feeling that had nothing to do with their contract. For the first time, she could acknowledge the bond growing between them as real, independent of duty or convenience. Days later, the rain of Seattle greeted them at a technology conference. The city's streets glistened under soft showers, and the scent of coffee and fresh pastries filled the air around Pike Place Market. They walked side by side, umbrellas shielding them, exploring the market's vibrant stalls. Local flowers, fish, and handmade crafts created a sensory contrast to the polished conference rooms they would occupy later that day. Amid the sound of vendors and the scent of wet pavement, Valentina spoke again about her architectural ambitions. Gabriel listened intently, occasionally nodding, occasionally asking questions that revealed his desire to understand every nuance. They paused to watch a fishmonger toss a salmon in precise arcs. The simplicity of the moment reminded Valentina how rare it was to feel entirely present with someone. Later, at the Olympic Sculpture Park, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The steel and glass structures reflected the overcast sky, and Gabriel turned to her with a seriousness that made her pause. Valentina, he began, his voice steady, all of this, our travels, the contract, the company struggles, it brought us together. But I've realized it's not enough to just fulfill obligations anymore. I want what we have to be real. Her heart skipped. You mean? I mean us, he said simply. Not for appearances, not for family expectations, not for any business reason. I want to make this real. You, me together, by choice, not circumstance. She felt a rush of relief and joy, her chest swelling as she reached for his hand. I want that too, she said. The words felt heavier and freer than any legal promise could carry. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly, each lost in their own thoughts, but linked by a growing certainty. They wandered along the waterfront, watched the city lights emerge through lingering mist, and allowed themselves to simply exist in the space they had chosen to create together. That evening, back at the hotel, they revisited the conversation in the quiet of their suite. Papers and schedules lay untouched. The outside world, the conference, investors, obligations could wait. Valentina shared her vision in detail, sketching ideas on a tablet and discussing how technology and architecture could merge to create sustainable hospitality projects. Gabriel offered insights and suggestions, his support unwavering. In that small, rain-kissed city, two people who had started as strangers united under the clarity of mutual understanding. Their connection was no longer a product of necessity. It was built on admiration, respect, and the courage to declare what they truly wanted. By nightfall, Seattle's streets reflected the soft glow of city lamps, and the room felt safe, quiet, and full of possibility. Valentina realized the contract that had brought them together had served its purpose. What they now had, honest, chosen partnership, was something beyond obligation. Gabriel's eyes met hers, the weight of his gaze soft but unmistakable. Whatever comes next, I want it to be ours, he said. I've learned that the only certainty that matters is the one we create together. Valentina nodded, understanding that every challenge, every business threat, and every contractual arrangement had led them to this clarity. The Sonoran Desert, the streets of Seattle, the moments in between, they had all guided them to a place where love, purpose, and vision could coexist without compromise. In the quiet of the hotel suite, they allowed themselves to imagine the future. Not the one dictated by circumstance, but the one defined by choice, partnership, and a shared commitment to build something lasting. Aspen's golden aspens framed the mountains, their leaves catching the late autumn sunlight and scattering warmth across the slopes. Valentina adjusted the train of her ivory gown as she walked alongside Gabriel toward the small clearing where their wedding ceremony would take place. Only close family and friends were present, making the day feel personal, deliberate, and entirely theirs. Gabriel's grandmother stood nearby, her expression radiant. She had long wished for her grandson to marry, but seeing him choose love rather than duty filled her with a quiet happiness that was impossible to overlook. Valentina felt a wave of gratitude toward her, recognizing how tradition and family expectations had shaped the journey that had brought them to this precise moment. Valentina's parents arrived from San Juan, their eyes glistening as they watched their daughter step into a union chosen freely. The couple shared smiles, hands brushing lightly, conveying a trust and understanding that had taken years to cultivate. The ceremony began, voices soft against the backdrop of mountain peaks and rustling leaves. The officiant spoke of love and partnership, the words emphasizing the balance between shared dreams and mutual support. When Gabriel took Valentina's hands in his, he looked into her eyes with a sincerity she had come to know well. "From now on," he said, "everything we build, everything we face, we do together." Her response was quiet but unwavering. "I choose you for love, for partnership, for all that we hope to create." The exchange of vows felt both familiar and new. These were not obligations written in a contract or promises made under necessity. They were declarations forged through shared experience, trust, and patience. The small gathering applauded softly as the couple sealed their vows with a kiss, the mountains around them echoing the significance of their choice. The reception took place at a nearby mountain resort, with floor-to-ceiling windows framing the continental divide. Snow began to fall gently, brushing against the glass and creating a sense of intimacy within the warm, candlelit hall. Guests toasted to love, resilience, and the joining of two families not by convenience, but by decision and care. 5 years passed. Rodriguez-Chin Holdings flourished under Valentina and Gabriel's joint leadership. Their properties integrated sustainable practices seamlessly, reflecting Valentina's architectural vision. The flagship resort in Big Sur demonstrated the harmony of nature and luxury design, each structure complementing its environment while telling a story of heritage and innovation. Gabriel's technology ventures focused on renewable energy, powering the resort network with methods that were both efficient and responsible. Together, they had created a business model that proved profitability and ecological responsibility could coexist. In their Napa Valley home, as the sun dipped behind the vineyard-covered hills, Valentina and Gabriel often reflected on the journey that had led them here. Sitting on the terrace, glasses of wine in hand, they spoke of the challenges they had overcome, the lessons learned, and the unexpected ways life had guided them. "I never thought a contract could lead to this," Valentina said softly, watching the light touch the vines. Gabriel smiled, resting his hand over hers. "It wasn't the contract that mattered in the end. It was everything we chose after it. The trust we built, the care we gave, the willingness to grow together. That's what created this." They leaned back in their chairs, the vineyard stretching before them, reflecting a life built not from obligation alone, but from conscious choices. Their partnership, professional and personal, had become a foundation for success, innovation, and love. The story of their union circulated quietly in business and design circles, not as gossip, but as proof that authenticity, collaboration, and courage could transform even the most practical arrangements into genuine connections. Valentina often thought about the early days, the boardrooms, the contracts, the uncertainty. Each challenge, each decision, had been a stepping stone toward a life defined by choice rather than necessity. Love, she realized, required both a solid foundation and room to expand, much like architecture itself. Gabriel looked toward the horizon. Every time I see you, I see what's possible when people invest in each other, when they commit beyond expectations, beyond convenience. Valentina squeezed his hand. We've learned to turn obligation into opportunity. And in doing so, we created something far greater than either of us could have imagined alone. As evening settled over the valley, they remained on the terrace, embracing the quiet satisfaction of a life fully chosen. Their journey from a business arrangement to authentic partnership had taught them that love, like architecture, was built with intention, respect, and vision. The path was neither simple nor straight, but it was theirs, crafted through mutual understanding and the courage to prioritize each other. For anyone witnessing their story, it served as a reminder. True partnership grows when people commit honestly, support each other's dreams, and remain open to possibilities beyond practicality. Obligations may initiate paths, but authentic choices build lasting foundations. To their audience, the lesson was clear: nurture connections with care, embrace vulnerability, and pursue shared goals with clarity. In every venture, whether personal or professional, genuine partnership transforms routine into extraordinary achievement and convenience into fulfillment. Valentina and Gabriel's journey, from a contract born of necessity to a love built on commitment, demonstrated that the strongest foundations allowed room to grow, evolve, and flourish together. Subscribe for more powerful love stories. Share where you're watching from around the world. Stay tuned for tomorrow's story, continuing to explore love, growth, and meaningful connection. Your support enables these stories to reach hearts everywhere.